for collaborating with us to coordinate this event. Career Conversation Series is co-sponsored by the Alumni Relations Office, and we'd also like to thank them for their generous support. So the purpose of this panel is threefold: provide you with inspiration, insight and advice, and also an opportunity to connect with professionals, alumni professionals working in government and social services. So before we begin, I'd like to ask you to turn off your cell phones and mobile devices so that we can be free of interruptions. And if you haven't already done so, there's a table at the back of the room, and if you can sign in, sign the registration sheet, or add your name to the list if you do not register, that would be great. And if you're interested in learning more about the Career Center and many services and events that we offer, such as today's event, please help yourself to one of our Career Center support booklets at the registration table, or come talk to myself or him at the back table if you have any questions about what we have or what services we provide to students. So we'll have about 1 hour for discussion, and I'll get started with a few questions, and then we'll take questions from the floor. There is an audience mic in the room, so when it's time for our student questions, feel free to come up to the audience mic and pose your questions to our panelists. At approximately 3:15, we will begin our informal mix and mingle session portion of the afternoon, and that will give you an opportunity to speak face to face with our panelists and ask any specific questions that you might have. And we will end our panel promptly at 4 o'clock today. Okay? So we would not be here today without our distinguished guests, our alumni panelists. So I'd like to introduce you to them. So on my far right is Omar Ali Khan, and Omar is with the Central Agency Liaison Coordinator with the Cabinet Office with the Government of Ontario. Next to Omar is Sonali Chakraborti, Project Manager of the Toronto Newcomer Initiative with the City of Toronto. Next to Sonali is Sheldon, Social Worker with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Next to Sheldon is Hilliard, Senior Project Coordinator, Senior Analyst, Project Implementation Office, College of Trades, Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities, and also former Senior Policy Analyst with the Ministry of Community and Social Services. And next to Tim is Orfanakos, Investigator of the Special Ombudsman Response Team SORT with the Office of the Ontario Ombudsman. Okay, so I'm going to get us started with a few questions, and maybe we'll start with Adam. So if you could, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce yourself and maybe tell us about your role and your key responsibilities within your current organization.
Absolutely. First of all, I apologize for this abomination of growth on my face. I was going to shave it off, but I didn't want to be disrespectful to the $2.36 donations I've received so far from November, so please excuse me. I don't know about distinguished, but I'll certainly do my best to try and act like it. As Sandra mentioned, I'm an investigator at the Ontario Ombudsman's office. And for those of you that haven't heard it, the Ombudsman is an independent officer of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Essentially a fancy way of saying it's a watchdog oversight for the Government of Ontario. We have jurisdiction to look at over 500 provincial government organizations and ministries. I'm sure some of my colleagues here have had the unfortunate pleasure of dealing with my office. We investigate administrative misconduct involving provincial government organizations. So essentially, if you have a complaint about the way a service is delivered or the application of a policy or program, you can complain to the Ombudsman's office. We're an office of last resort, so we require you to go through the complaint channels before you come to our office. And when you get to us, we try to look at see if you've been dealt with fairly, reasonably, adequately. We're not an advocate. We look to make sure that the process that you availed yourself of was fair and reasonable. My role as an investigator, I'm on a team called the Special Ombudsman Response Team, and we look at systemic complaint issues. So we will look at one organization or a certain program of one organization. We'll essentially do an audit of it, look at how it operates, if it's getting a lot of complaints, why is it getting a lot of complaints, what areas does it need to improve. So we'll go out, we'll interview people, we'll do a lot of research, a lot of fact finding, speak with citizens or clients that felt they've been impacted by the inadequate operation or delivery of a government service. and we try to find out what can we do to make this service better. So we can make recommendations aimed at creating better delivery of services and better administrative governance of organizations. From one day I'll be dealing with a complaint about the Ontario Provincial Police, I may be dealing with a complaint about the Ministry of Training Colleges, Universities, or I may be dealing with a property assessment or a lottery complaint. So it's very varied, it's very diverse, we have a lot of fascinating people, and it's been quite a good experience.
Thank you, Adam.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Tim Hilliard, and my current role, I just started, it's my second week, so it's very new to me. I'm a senior project coordinator and senior analyst with the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities, and I'm in the project implementation office for the Ontario College of Trades. The Ontario College of Trades is it's an industry-led organization that will be regulating the skilled trades. So much like the Ontario College of Nurses, Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons, so it's going to be a regulatory body that will regulate the trades. And it's industry-led, so it's being led by the trades themselves. We have implementation in the spring of 2013. So right now I'm the team lead, and I'm leading implementation of that, so the transfer of all of the ministry functions to the new college that's been established. Its operations are not up and running yet, so we are working towards having doors open.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, it's so new, I apologize. I could talk about something else, but for now.
Sheldon.
Oh, okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Sheldon Parchment, and I'm a social worker in the Forensic Outpatient Service at CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And the Forensic Outpatient Service, basically the forensic mental health is where the medical world meets the legal world. So if an individual commits a criminal offense and there's suspicion that a mental health illness was the driving force behind that behavior, they're sent for a forensic assessment, usually at a psychiatric hospital. Once that happens, they can be found what's called not criminally responsible. For those who watch CSI or any other kind of crime movies, that's the insanity plea that lawyers will use to get their clients off. So once they become not criminally responsible, they're usually sent to a hospital and they fall under what's called the Ontario Review Board. The Ontario Review Board is a government agency that reviews these clients. They're responsible for setting restrictions, limitations on their life, where they can live. They have to abstain, what they create is called disposition order. It's a legal document setting restrictions on their life, where they can live. They have to abstain from alcohol, illicit drug use. They have to stay away from the victim of the index offense. And they're usually hospitalized for, on average, 2 years. Once the Ontario Review Board, they review cases once a year. Once that happens, there might be a recommendation for a community discharge. Once that happens, they become a client under the Forensic Outpatient Service where I work. And I work on a multidisciplinary team, and we're responsible. We kind of wear two hats. One is a treatment, recovery, rehabilitation piece. The other is our commitment to ensuring safety to the public, and that's fulfilling the disposition order. So making sure these clients are compliant with this order, and that could be asking for random drug screens, medication management, pretty much keeping tabs on their life, what they're doing, if there's structure, and if we feel there's a threat to society, we have the ability to detain them back into hospital. It's more of a treatment role than a directive role, but we're usually called the probation officers of the hospital, which I don't like that term, but it's pretty much what I do.
Thank you, Sheldon. Sonali?
So I'm Sonali Chakraborti, and I'm the project manager of the Toronto Newcomer initiative, and that's led by the City of Toronto. So our project has several components, and just to give you a high-level sense of it, one aspect is to help the City of Toronto, the municipal government, plan and respond better to the fact that we all know that there are more than 50% of Toronto residents were born outside of Canada. So it's just our demographic reality, but how does the city plan better for this. So that involves a lot of interconnection and liaison with all of the city divisions. So when you think of the city, that could be thinking about simple things like collecting garbage, but there's like a whole bunch of other things that the city does. There's public health, there's running community centers and recreation centers, and it's in all of these elements, how do those individual divisions plan and respond for the demographics. Another component of the project is collaboration beyond the city government. So a lot of what happens to respond to newcomers actually come in collaboration with the other levels of government. So the federal government is who selects immigrants to come to Canada, and the provincial government has some role there, and both fund the nonprofit sector to deliver a lot of services. So that's sort of the connection to the social service world. So we collaborate with both those two other levels of government, but also with community organizations. So there are a lot of details that go into that collaboration, but that sort of gives you a sense of what we're working on. It's multifaceted. We have a team, a sort of a secretariat that's in the social development division at the city, but we work closely with a lot of other staff from other divisions.
Thank you very much. Before Omar answers the question, those of you at the back, I know some of you are having trouble hearing. How's the volume right now? Good. We can't have it go any higher because we'll get feedback. If you want to move up a little bit, feel free to do so. Okay? I know there's some noise from the cafeteria, so that might be impeding on your hearing as well. Okay, Omar?
Great. So as Sandra mentioned, my name is Omar and I work for a cabinet office within the Government of Ontario. And cabinet office is the Premier's ministry. So we basically provide advice and analysis to the Premier and his cabinet in terms of achieving their government priorities. Specifically in regards to my role, which is the Central Agency Liaison Coordinator, if you, any kind of initiative or commitment you want to bring forward for the Premier and his cabinet to be able to approve, it not only has to be good policy, but it has to be fiscally attainable. So where my role comes into is that I have to ensure that the policy folks are working with the finance folks to ensure that anything they're bringing forward, the two things are in harmony, and that I think would be the best way to kind of describe what I do.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we'll come back to Adam now, and all of our panelists. If you could tell us how you got to where you are. So walk us through, what you were doing at York, what you studied, and how you became interested in government and social services, how you fell into the role, or how you got started. What was your career story?
Sure. So I did a one-year master's degree at York in critical disability studies. Before that, I did a 4-year undergrad at University of Guelph before I came to York. I was interested anytime you get into the arts, I think most people have an interest in the social sciences or even government as a place to get into, and then that was the case with me. I found one thing that sort of directed me into my career right now is when I was doing my master's, I reached out and started getting involved in community organizations. There wasn't really any internships or any employment opportunities that were linked through my master's program, so I went out, started cold calling, put boots to the ground, and just started contacting organizations that I was interested in related to disability and social policy, and just offered my services as a volunteer, but more I like to think of it as unpaid employment. And that got the ball rolling. I started to make some contacts in there, and started to get some good references. And it snowballed from there. I got involved in a few more community initiatives, again in the social services. And at the same time, I was looking for a job as well. Essentially, what got me to my job right now was networking. And I won't spend too long about it, explain it right now, but essentially it was a network opportunity that I had made when I didn't even know I was making it. Years ago, I had a personal interaction with someone that went over very well. And then years later, when the job came up at the Ontario Ombudsman's office, that person I had a personal interaction with was employed at that office. So I did up my resume, I did a cold call to him, just let him know that see if he remembered me first of all, and he did, and let him know that I'd submitted my resume. And I was able to get a foot in the door, and thankfully, from my education and my volunteer experience, I was able to demonstrate that I had the skills needed for the job. So So it was a little bit of initiative on my own part and a little bit of luck in terms of the networking that definitely allowed me to get my foot in the door into government.
Great, thank you. Tim?
So I had a bit of a longer path to get, I guess, to where I am now. So I went to York originally, this campus, in 2000 when I finished high school, and York went on strike and I decided to leave. And I took some time off. I just worked. I worked in a restaurant, and then I returned. I went to college, and I did a certificate in human resources management. Realized college wasn't for me, and I decided to go back to university. And I went to Glendon, so the bilingual campus at Bayview and Lawrence, much smaller than here. Forgot how big this place is. So I did international studies, and I also did multidisciplinary studies. I did a double major. Multidisciplinary studies, I focused in refugee and migration studies. I know they offer a certificate here, but I wanted to do more intensive studies. That was a field of interest for me. During my undergrad years, I sort of knew that just studying and reading books wasn't going to land me a job. I was heavily involved in the school community. I was part of the World University Service of Canada Student Refugee Program. I was an executive member for 2 years on that committee. I was student government, director of cultural affairs, counselor. I volunteered in the community a lot, so I was mentoring. My time was really taken up by other experiences that would really give me the unpaid work experience that I would need in the end to get to where I wanted to go. So I finished at Glendon in 2007. And while I was in school, I just served tables, nothing really special. So I knew I really had to work hard to build up my community involvement and whatnot. So I finished 2007, and I did an internship with the Ontario-Quebec Exchange program. So it's a program with Ontario and Quebec for improving your second language skills. So I did that, and I worked with the Ministry of Employment in Montreal. And I worked in a local office, and I assisted with social assistance determinations and employment insurance determinations and services that people need when they're unemployed. And that was a great experience. So I was there, I think, 4 months. That was a fantastic experience. I really encourage those kinds of summer opportunities that you can take. That program, for example, is available every summer. After that, I decided, I thought I would do my master's and decided to take a year off to make some money, and I decided to teach English, so I went to Korea. I was supposed to stay a year. I didn't. I just stayed 3 months. I came back December 2007, and I started looking for work. And it was kind of luck as well. Sometimes it just is, but I applied for a couple positions with some temp agencies, and I applied for one to work in a registrar's office as a bilingual assistant for something I can't exactly remember. So it was with an agency. I went in and I interviewed, and when she was looking at my resume and just saw the amount of experience that I had, organizing conferences and project management and all of the unpaid work experience, she thought to herself, she had another opportunity in mind, and it turned out to be something within the Ontario government. So 2 days later, I went, interviewed, and luckily I got that position. It was solely because of the unpaid work experience that I brought. The French language skills that I have as well were really useful. I found that was really important to get my foot in the door. So I worked initially as a project coordinator and research analyst. And I organized the Ministry of Community and Social Services, the second annual symposium on disability and employment. So I organized a conference for employers to encourage them to break down barriers to employing people with disabilities. It was well received. I was in that position for, I think, almost a year and a half, and then a policy position came up, and I applied for it, and I got that position subsequent to that. So I was a senior policy analyst for nearly 2 years in the same program, the Ontario Disability Support Program. So it's a social assistance program for people with disabilities. It provides income and employment supports. And up until last week, I've worked there. So I was there in that branch almost 5 years. I think that about sums it up.
Great, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
So I started volunteering in the hospital. Healthcare is kind of my background. I started volunteering very, very young. My mom sent me there, which I thought was more of a punishment, but it really, really kind of shaped where my career was going to go. She worked at Sunnybrook, so she got me a job when I was 18 years old as a ward clerk. And that exposure to the healthcare field really, really kind of helped shape what I wanted to do. Although I didn't know exactly in what capacity I wanted to work in healthcare, I knew for sure healthcare was where I was going to end up. So I went to York, and I graduated in 2007 with a Bachelor of Health Studies. Right before I graduated, I hit a huge pro line ticket, football, and I decided to go to Europe as soon as I graduated, which I strongly recommend everyone does. I went to Europe, and randomly coming home from a club in Madrid, I stumbled up the stairs and applied for a job in Workopolis in North York General Hospital. That's not a career tip. I don't recommend anyone does that. But when I got back home, I had a message waiting. And I went for the interview, and it was actually for a position the position I applied for, they already had someone in mind internally, a nurse. And that was a bit more of a process. But it was great because I got good experience in the interview process. Once I left the interview, the manager actually kind of ran me down and asked me to come back into the interview room and offered me a position in the patient relations office as an assistant to the patient family relations coordinator. And it was that 1 year working in that office where I really kind of formalized my plan to become a social worker. I was working for the patient family relations coordinator who was a social worker by trade and really kind of taught me a bit about the profession. I became more and more interested in social work. And North York General has a decent sized mental health program. We used to get a lot of clients coming downstairs who were actively psychotic, telling me things like the nurses had guns and planting bombs, and I became more and more interested in that field of healthcare. So I started applying volunteer positions at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in their community support program. And I did that for a year, and then one day I saw a job. It was for a tobacco control project, a knowledge translation project, and I applied for it. I applied on a Friday, got contacted Monday, interview on Wednesday, and got the job on Friday. Really kind of streamlined process. I've been working for that project for the last 4 years, and while I was there, I applied for my MSW. I did at the University of Windsor. They have an off-campus program that allows you to work full-time. Because I didn't have a Bachelor of Social Work, my options were kind of limited in terms of what schools I can go to, because you can't go to school part-time if you don't have a BSW in Toronto, which really sucks. Full-time option is the only one you have. And if that's not an option, it really sucks. So Windsor kind of really helped me out. I conferred in June. I applied for a job internally at CAMH. And the only reason why I was able to apply for this social work position is because I was already in CAMH. 85% of the jobs don't meet external applicants' eyes because it's such a huge organization and there's so much lateral and vertical movement within that you don't even see the job. So it was really important that I got my foot in the door, although it wasn't in a clinical or social services role. I wouldn't have my job if it wasn't for that.
Sonali?
Okay, so I have had what I call an atypical path, but I actually think if you listen to everyone's stories, you'll hear atypical paths, so I don't think there are typical ones. But I started my undergraduate at Waterloo with a degree in engineering, which seems like not the typical first step to end up in government and anything related to social services. But I actually chose the program at Waterloo called Systems Design Engineering because it talked about applying a systems perspective to human systems and social systems as well. I can't say concretely that 4 years of engineering really gave me a lot around human systems as much as that was advertised at the beginning of the program, but it did give me sort of a foundational framework around thinking processes and analytical processes, and that just happens to be like my starting point, and it is something that I continue to use throughout everything I do. But I finished engineering and I was not prepared to work in a field that didn't allow me interaction with people. Like that was what I wanted to be doing. And there didn't seem to be a lot of pathways coming out of engineering of how I was going to be focusing my job that was interacting with people. So I chose to go to do a Bachelor of Education, so a teaching degree, so that I could at least post-engineering. My next thing was going to be more people focused. So I ended up at a school, I had lots of grand plans of where I thought I wanted to teach in terms of, with diverse communities, in an inner city school, in a big high school. I ended up teaching at an all-girls school that was a private boarding school. Pretty different demographic than what my original intention was, but it actually worked out well. So I was teaching math and physics, and I had my own interests in mentoring young women to follow untraditional paths, and I spent some time there, and I did a lot of other side projects while I was teaching. There was a lot of scope and opportunity to do that. But then I wanted to eventually get back to my original interests, which was working closer to government, making more of a macro impact, so policy, politics, etc. That was always my interest coming out of high school. I won't give you an explanation of why I picked engineering to get there, but I've gotten there anyways, and as I said, I think my undergrad helps in many ways. So I chose to leave teaching and then come to the Schulich School of Business, specifically because it offered specialty areas in public policy and nonprofit management. So I chose a MBA, not an MPA that you could do in an arts faculty. For example, Queen's or other schools have that, but I actually thought, once again, going along in my alternate ways of thinking, that I'm going to use a business focus to work in government. So I really enjoyed my time at Schulich, and I do recommend those of you who might not be in part of that school to take electives there if and when you get a chance. And I would say my biggest takeaway from that program that I use now that I think is useful in any context is there was a course on complexity approaches to systems thinking, and I really think in any sort of area today, whether it's government, the private sector, or nonprofits, we're often talking about systems and complex systems, and nothing is really linear. And I think in a lot of education processes, we go linear, but the reality out there is very networked or circular or whatever way you want to think of it. So how did I end up at the city after all of that? So I would have hoped to have directly applied to government jobs right out of Schulich, but I don't think that was necessarily realistic. And so I did a series of several things. Getting involved with the sector, I think the best thing I probably did is put in some time with a community agency in the nonprofit sector to really understand how things work on the ground before really entering government. And I think, again, like understanding real life, not theoretical concepts was a value add to end up in government. So I worked in a community-based organization in a neighborhood in Toronto that's heavily dense with newcomers. I didn't know that was the field I was going to end up in. That's just the organization I connected with. I connected with it out of doing a project at Schulich. So a lot of the kinds of work that I could relate to the second speaker, doing unpaid, volunteer, but professional type of work. Some of that was coming out of courses, some of that was just coming out of interest. So as I was doing this, various friends or whoever would say, you know what, I know someone who sits on a board and they're really looking for someone to do some strategic planning for them. And you're doing strategy courses at Schulich. Do you want to help them out? And then you would do like a one-off project. So I actually structure all of those one-off projects as consulting because that's what they were. Some people had more money to pay you, some people didn't have a lot of money to pay you, but you're really giving professional service and advice. So there's a series of things I did, and I won't get into all the details, and if you're interested, you can ask me afterwards, but those all accumulated to land me to be well positioned when I applied for this particular job at the city. So I'll leave it at that.
So I did my Bachelor of Health Studies at York University with the School of Health Policy and Management, and just in terms of the courses I took and some of the issues we were dealing with in the classes that we were taking, I just knew I wanted to become a policy advisor. And one of the things that was told to me, and I think it was kind of the best advice I got, was that just with an undergraduate degree I would be able to become a policy advisor. And I had a few friends who actually worked in the provincial government, and they had mentioned to me that they were taking a master's program at Queen's, the MPA program, and they said, it's well regarded within the provincial government. A lot of senior leaders have taken it, and the reputation is good. So I applied for that program, I got in, And I took the program, and I just have to say what was very valuable about that program, the Queen's program, is that you have a lot of former senior management that teach the courses there. And you go into those courses, and it's really like sitting in with the deputy's briefing. And you got a lot of stuff to read, and you're grilled. Like you sit there, you get into class, and they'll ask you questions directly, and you need to know the answers. And I can tell you, like the first few classes, our blood pressure was this high in terms of, you were just scared that you'd be picked on and you'd have to answer the question. So I think that really helped to prepare me in terms of becoming a policy advisor and what I'd be dealing with. And I was very fortunate because I was able to get a position within the Ontario provincial government with the health promotion ministry before I even completed my master's degree. So I was very fortunate that way. And I mean, for me, it was a dream job because I had studied health policy and management, and working within the Ministry of Health Promotion was really great. But at some point I said, you know what, my whole background is health, and I need to kind of expand on that. And what I did was, and it's something that I think Adam made mention to, and also Tim made mention to, and Sheldon, is the fact that, you know what, you're kind of in charge of your own career. And I said, you know what, I'm going to reach out to people, I'm going to network. And that's what I did. I reached out to, other managers within different ministries, areas that I was interested in. And I was very fortunate to have one of the managers at the Ministry of Community and Social Services, where Tim has also worked. She called me in, she said, you know what, I really appreciate the fact that you emailed me and you wanted to learn more about, what we do. And she said, you know what, I have no positions, but at the same time, you know what, I'm more than happy to tell you what we do. And so I said, I'd love to hear what you do. And we sat for 2 hours, and she shared everything with me, and I was quite excited afterwards in terms of the work they did. 2 weeks later, she called me and she said, you know what, we have a position, and I'm considering you. And so, there was someone else that was being considered as well. I got the position. And I have to say the Ministry of Community and Social Services, and I think Tim would agree with that, it's a wonderful ministry because they look to foster growth. And I knew I didn't just want to be a policy advisor, I wanted to do more than that. And I was very fortunate from there to work in the Assistant Deputy Minister's office and then into the Deputy Minister's office. And that role was really kind of instrumental because you are the conduit between the political end of government and the bureaucratic end of government, and it teaches you a lot in terms of how decision making happens. And from there you say, what are you going to do next? Because getting into the Deputy Minister's office it's a good place to be, and where do you go next? And kind of logically, it's Cabinet Office, because Cabinet Office again is the Premier's ministry, and so that's where you really see everything happening, and what's what you guys all see once it comes out. And so I was very fortunate with my experience in the Deputy Minister's office and my work as a policy advisor. I was able to land a position within Cabinet Office, and I've been working there for the last 2 years, and it's been very, very educational, very insightful.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your stories with us. Okay, so at this point, I think we can take some questions from the floor. So I'm going to give you, I do have another question, so I know it takes a while sometimes to summon up the courage to walk up to the mic. So while you're deciding what question you want to ask, or whether or not to get up to the mic, I have my final question. So all of you, I think, talked about the importance of networking and getting involved, whether paid or unpaid, and community work and extracurricular activities and project work. But the question is, many students I interact with, they hear this term networking and volunteering and all that, but they don't know how to get started. So what specific advice would you have for students who are interested in getting into this field, government and social services, about how they can start networking, where they can even find who to network with, and how they can find out more about opportunities to get, whether paid or unpaid, to get involved. Adam, would you like to start?
The internet. Anyone who works in government, in Ontario government or even federal, you can find them online. Almost everyone. You can find them online, what specific division they work in, what program they work on, a little bit of information about what specifically they may be working on. And their emails are up there, their phone numbers are up there. I'm sure most of you have heard of LinkedIn. It's also a useful useful resource. You can type some keywords, some things that you're thinking about getting involved in, and it'll show some people on there that are involved in it. And it's really nothing more than just, it's similar to what most people have said up here, just sending out an email, introducing yourself, a little bit why you're reaching out, what your interests are in, and asking you to take them out for a cup of coffee and talk a little bit more about what they do and what advice they may give. That's what I did when I was doing my master's, and I think I emailed about 4 or 5 places, and there's a lot of disappointment when you do these things. It's really, you gotta search for the pot of gold, but it only comes to those that are persistent. And I think on my 4th one, the nonprofit agency, the vice president called me back and he invited me down. I had to go through 3 interviews with them just to volunteer. They weren't even paying me. They interviewed me more than if I was actually going to get hired on. But it really is nothing more than just initiative and thinking outside the box. Like I said, my network that really helped me. I didn't even know I was networking with them at the time. And I only pursued that option because my parents were thrusting upon me. Call this guy. You know him. He knows you. He knows what you're about, the work you do. And I thought, this is not gonna work, really. And then I'm working at the office right now because I did that. But there's really no science to it. It's nothing fancy. Just find someone's number, find an email, have a little bit of a script, present yourself professionally, and really. If the person doesn't take the time to listen to you or respond to you, then it's probably not someone you really want to network or get to know in the first place. So just don't be shy, just put yourself out there.
Thank you for your advice. Tim?
I was going to start with saying don't be shy, because that's something that I sort of live by. I mean, really, it's up to you to really to reach out and try to make contacts that you need. I'm really big on not being intimidated by people. It's a job is what a person does, but that's not necessarily who they are. And a lot of people are intimidated by a position that somebody holds or whatnot, but that shouldn't really keep you from reaching out to them, potentially sparking a conversation or sending an email and seeing if they would take some time to sit down with you and chat. For me, I've had nothing but great success with that. Some people sometimes are surprised with who I'm comfortable emailing or whatnot, but it's only worked in my favor. So. For myself, I'm also somebody, I'm not a yes person, so I always question everything, and I think that's why policy was a good fit for me. But because of that, I'm always wanting to find out more answers. I don't really believe what somebody says, so I'm constantly connecting with people, asking questions, trying to figure out the whole story of something. And through that, I've made fantastic connections and really built a huge network, especially where I work. I have people that I can call up almost in any ministry if I need something at any time, and they can do the same with me. In terms of, I have a lot of students. I actually had a couple email me earlier today because they wanted to attend today, but they couldn't, and they found my email through InfoGo. Like Adam said, we're available online, and a couple of them emailed me asking if I would take some time to chat with them, and I'm happy to do that. So I will get back to them, and I really encourage you to reach out, and I mean, especially people that are sitting in this kind of environment, they're probably the kind of people that you might want to approach. Yeah. So I just say go for it, and it's up to you. It's sometimes it's luck, some things come your way, but really it's up to you to really to set your path and get out there.
Thank you, Sheldon.
So the advice is kind of wearing thin as we move down the table. But just to add to the first 2 speakers, I think it's really important to start early. If you have an idea of what you want to get into, start early as you can. Join a group or an association at school, because they'll have access to talks, conferences where you can go and meet these people and pull them aside after their talk and just ask them for the conversation. Another thing I guess just to add is to really learn what your professors' research interests are, and have a conversation with them and ask them for a little direction. I think that's pretty much all.
Just to echo what others have said, I think it's finding places to get involved and trying to create a relationship with the people that you meet. It's not just a one-time meeting and a one-time conversation. It's a network, or it's a useful element of your network if over time they get to know you or you do something with them. And that's the idea of getting involved in groups or associations or with nonprofit organizations on a volunteer basis. It's only when they know you and trust you that you might get called again to participate in something. So, go beyond just the first meeting.
So just echoing what the others said, I think a lot of the time people feel, they tend to hesitate saying, I don't want to bother someone. I don't want to call them. I don't want to email them. And I'd say bother them. Because the worst thing to come out of it is that you just won't get a response. So just in regards to what I had shared with you before, I had emailed 30 different managers and one responded, and I was very fortunate from that to get a position. So, just don't look at one thing and say, this is what I want to do, and, I'm just going to email them or contact them, and then if you don't get a response, it's all disappointment. So I think that I would definitely say would be very important. Just do it, because the worst thing to come out of it is you just get nothing out of it. You don't even get a response. And secondly, I would just kind of emphasize again, it's really important where you go for your postgraduate studies. For me, I was very fortunate. I knew I wanted to become a health policy advisor. And as I mentioned to you all before, is that we had a lot of former senior management that taught in my program. And so they have their networks, and so they can connect you and say, if you're interested in this, let me maybe connect you with a senior manager within the health department or something like that. So I think that's important too, is to really think very carefully as to what you want to do for your postgraduate studies.
Yeah, if I could also add, I'm big on mentoring and, finding somebody that you really look up to in your field or whatever you want to go into, and finding somebody that you can relate to and connect with and, form a relationship with them and tap their brain. It's really, for myself, I have 2 mentors at work, assistant deputy ministers, and I can count on them, if I have questions about something, or I meet with them regularly for coffee to discuss sort of how my work is going. And they've often connected me with people just to have just a conversation about the work that they do, not necessarily for job opportunity, but just to connect with some different people, some different projects. Mentoring is, I think, a big thing that you can do.
So I think all of you, what you shared, Sonali summed up, that it's about building relationships. It's not just a one-time thing, one interaction, one phone call, one email, but you continue to build that relationship and the rapport, and to ensure that people know you're top of mind, that they know what your skills are, what your interests are, and they think of you when something comes up. Okay, great. So does no one have a question? Okay, great, thank you.
Here in the Career Center, there's training for informational interview. Is that something you are referring to, Tim and Adam? Informational interview.
Yes, they are great.
So they can discuss what they're doing and if you are interested in it?
Yes, yeah, have a few questions prepared and then sit down with them and chat. Yeah, that's a great thing to do, for sure.
Does everyone know what an informational interview is? Tim, do you want to
Sure.
elaborate a little bit about that?
Like Omar said, where he emailed 30 managers and got 1 response. Generally, you email people or a group of people and you try to get somebody able to sit down with you and...
Sorry, Tim, can I ask you this?
Oh, sorry. And you try to find somebody that will just sit down with you and have a conversation, usually about what the job is that they do or where they work. Generally, it's not necessarily somebody in management, but I tend to reach out at that level. And you just sit down, have a conversation, ask the work they do, what goes on in their office. I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, Sandra, just to what Tim and Adam were saying, is that especially when you're approaching people, don't go with the thing saying, do you have any jobs that are available?
Right.
The main thing is to ask, I think the key is that I want to learn more about what you do and what I'm interested in. Do your research. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at the first time we talked about an informational interview is basically an interview where you're trying to gather information and trying to gather advice, and but you wouldn't ask questions that you can easily find on the website. Right? So you'd ask questions about the individual's experience or any specific advice they might have about or insight they might have about the organization they work for, that kind of thing. Okay,
Yeah, I think it varies quite a bit.
Okay.
Hi, I would say that sometimes people are very wary about having a LinkedIn account, even for me, because I feel like my private life is out in the open, but I've heard that other people say it's really good professionally. So do you have any advice on how to make a good account, any specific keywords we can use, anything like that?
So, and this is something that has come up frequently with students, my interactions with students, wondering about how do you balance, putting yourself out there so that you can network and build your network, but at the same time maintaining some kind of privacy as well? Any thoughts?
Well, I think with LinkedIn, I think it is a more professional site, and I feel comfortable using that. And I've actually had quite a few connections made through it, and people getting in touch with me about opportunities. Other social media, I'm very private about, but then I'm also sensible. I don't just let pictures get taken of me anywhere. I'm very conscious of how you present yourself in public. But LinkedIn, I'm not so leery. I wouldn't put phone number and whatnot, but they can contact you through the message service. But I think it's good to, basically you want to have your resume there. Your education, the experience that you've had, your volunteer experience, community experiences, what you've done in school while you were studying, anything that will help you stand out.
Do you recommend putting in a picture?
Yes.
Yes?
I do. I don't know. Not everybody's comfortable, but
Thank you.
yeah.
Hi, I have a question that perhaps a lot of people here can relate, but I do want to introduce myself and perhaps give you a little bit of a background. I'm a student at York University. I'm in my third year of political science public administration, and I'm working for a bilingual certificate with English and French. So I'm in my third year right now, and I've become more focused. So I know that I do want to pursue policy. The past summer I had a really good opportunity working for a cabinet minister. But in terms of this summer, I'm looking for part-time or summer positions for students like us. I know that, Ontario Public Service, they have the 2-year internship program, but a lot of us can't afford to take 2 years away from school, even if we do get in. So in terms of that, do you know any resources or any, any sort of internship opportunities that we can perhaps look into for this summer? Thank you.
So I'm just going to put this recommendation out there, which is using that summertime as an opportunity to offer service yourself. Now, there's a bit of a challenge between that and looking for something that's paid, because I think that there are particular structures or there's only certain opportunities, and I don't know if I can specifically advise about that. But if you find yourself in a situation where, you can secure other paid part-time work, but you're also looking for something professional, even if it's not for the whole summer, start that process of informational interviews and networking like now, so that maybe I feel like there are lots of times where we look for some support. And sometimes there are official programs to get student interns, and sometimes they happen more through networking and unofficially, but and I would say that with community organizations as well, they're often looking for capacity, and there might be something really interesting to do for them. And the other thing I would say is maybe consider doing it as like 2 or 3 people. It doesn't always have to be individual, but if you can kind of say we've got some complementary skills and we can do a bit of a group project for you, like that might be another way to land an experience.
What I would say is with the provincial government, they have a summer job program as well. And I think that starts in terms of the jobs, what jobs are going to be coming for the summer. It starts in February. So you should just go onto the provincial website and it will give you a link to summer jobs. But I think I'd like to echo what Sonali was saying too, is that, not-for-profit sector, that's a good place to look in for policy, because you're going to work for a smaller organization that will need your help, and you'll be responsible for a lot more, and that will really get you ready in terms of becoming a policy advisor within government, because you may not have that same kind of responsibility or be able to see as much working for the provincial government on a part-time basis or a summer position as you would within the not-for-profit. So that's something that I would definitely kind of recommend to you. But the summer jobs is great. We have a lot of students who graduated from their undergraduate and are going into their master's program, and they've done that program. So you do get some good experience on that. I would definitely look around February or March.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just support Omar's point there that the Ontario government has the summer internships. The one that I mentioned, the Ontario-Quebec exchange program, if you have French language skills, then that's a great program as well. It's, you can be anywhere in Quebec. But as well, I would say it's sometimes hard, but school is expensive, right? But for me, at least, to gain the experiences that I needed, I kind of sacrificed, went somewhere where I made $10 an hour, but I worked for the government in Montreal. You know, I certainly wasn't saving anything. I wasn't living life of luxury, but you know, I realized, you know, this experience is worth it. So sometimes you have to sort of make some sacrifices too. Summers before that, I mean, I generally would work full-time, but then the rest of my time would be spent finding opportunities for myself to help community organizations or volunteering somewhere constantly. If I couldn't do it paid, then my schedule was filled with trying to gain experiences otherwise, so I really encourage that.
I know this isn't related to government services, but for those interested in more public health education, I know the TEACH project at CAMH, the program I used to work for, the Avra summer internship program. So if everyone's interested, contact me after.
Thank you. Next question?
It's a two-part question. The first one is, again, regarding this networking. I have a lot of challenges in terms of maintaining that connection with my networks. I know a lot of people in the managerial positions, but I have a tendency to maybe meet them once and then not maintain that connection. So I was wondering if you could give us specific examples of ways for us to maintain that connection. So that's the first part of my question. And the second part of my question.
Maybe we'll start there first. So I have a clarification question though. When you say you have difficulty maintaining your connections, is it because you are afraid to, you don't know how often to contact them?
Yeah, I think it's, well, first of all, I think it's life gets very busy. And also, I'm very shy. Like how you were commenting is that you get very shy and you don't want to seem to be bothersome. So I liked your comment, Omar, where you said bother them, bother them. So I think maybe giving us ways to overcome the shyness and little tips on overcoming that.
Hi, how are you? I mean, I can't speak for myself, but I really don't think there's any trick to it. Keep in touch with someone you were with a friend that you haven't spoken with in a few years. I actually just recently connected with a friend of mine from undergrad that I'd spoken about 5 years. I found him on LinkedIn, and it really was just, hey, how's it going? I see you're doing well. This is what I'm up to. We should reconnect sometime. It really is just bother them, and it shouldn't matter how you initiate it. Really, all it is just, I hope you're doing well. This is what I'm up to. I have a few irons in the fire. These are some things I'm going on. What are you up to? It'd be great to hear from you sometime. That's me. No trick to it, really.
I think it's important to remember too that you're not necessarily going to make that kind of a connection with everyone, and sometimes it's only going to be that one time that you sit down with them and have a conversation, and it doesn't necessarily need to be much more than that, right? I mean, if you're in an informational interview, you might get all the information that you were looking for, and they feel that they've shared with you what they can, and sometimes that happens, but then, I mean, I think that you at some point feel a connection with somebody that you've met with, and that will sort of just happen. You click, maybe you have some interest while you're conversing, that you realize you have some similar interests or hobbies or something, and then that relationship will sort of develop. And common interests, for sure, for me, have been what has tied me to keeping my connections. And as well, it depends on what you're connecting with them for, right? So if you're constantly just updating them on how you're doing, you have to evaluate, is that something that they really have the time for either? Because you also don't want to contact them too often, so you have to have a fine balance there too, I think.
So I can kind of relate to you because I'm a shy person as well. And what I would kind of say to you is basically do your research. Like often what I would do is that before I met with somebody, I'd check and see, what they've done. Something that's, something really interesting about them. And so then when I would have that conversation with them, I'd bring it up and they'd be like, oh, how did you know that? And it would spark a kind of, there'd be a little bit of a connection. So I would strongly look at that, and again, I would kind of emphasize again what both Adam and Tim have said, but also at the same time, do your research. Because that's how you can start the conversation. You can say, I know that you did this 3 years ago. This was a really wonderful initiative, and I've done, my background is such and such, and I've done research in that, and I just want to learn more how you guys came to this or that. And you'll just start talking, and you'll forget about any kind of shyness or feeling a little bit timid or anything like that. So that's what I would suggest. It'd be very helpful, and people will remember you. I think if you have that little bit of chemistry going on, and you've met face to face, people like that. People like when you reach out, they go, you know what, this person is actually is making that initiative, and they'll remember you, and you'll be surprised. It'll be the highest of the highest. It'll be like deputy ministers or senior management who will say, you know what, I was thinking of you the other day because I saw this or that, and so you know what, really give people a chance. That's what I would say.
To add one small thing, if you're really, really shy, find a friend who has a similar interest and make that meeting with them. Just go with a friend, so you don't have to do it on your own.
Thank you. The second part is I recently went through the Ontario Public Service website as an external applicant to a position I'm interested in, and I found it extremely general but specific. Very specific. And I'm wondering if you've gone through that process, because you really have to click on all the links to help you make your resume and cover letter stand out. And it's like pages and pages and pages of information. And I'm wondering what you did if you went through that process, what tips you have to help us through that process, and anything else in terms of the application process to certain positions. Thank you.
So your question is about how to navigate the Ontario Public Service recruitment process.
Yes, it's very detailed, and it feels almost like you're in an exam process, so I'm wondering if you have any tips on that.
Yeah, I can say that it certainly can seem overwhelming. But what I would say is that, the posting, the initial page is the job description, the sort of brief, concise description of the job and what qualifications they are looking for. I can say that the qualifications that they are on those ads are listed in order of importance. So the order that they come in is the order that you should be targeting them. It's something that I learned shortly after joining the public service. I had no idea when I was applying as an external candidate. So that's definitely a big tip that I always give people. People don't assume that would be the case. As well, look at the job spec. So there's a job specification as well. And that will give you sort of the actual detailed overview of what the tasks are, your responsibilities, what kind of judgment are you expected to have. And what I try to do is don't do more than a page for a cover letter. You don't want to go over. Resume, try to stick to 2 pages. Don't go over. And you want to try to hit some of the key words that are in the job description. You want to hit what is listed in the qualifications. You want to hit as many of those words as you can. And you want to bring in words from the job specification to speak to how you have those qualifications. So you want to use as much of the language as possible that they're providing there in that ad. For the initial stage, it doesn't require extensive research, until you are at the interview stage. Initially, just to prepare your resume and cover letter, just use the description and the specification. So try not to get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I would echo what Tim has said. Just to, and again, around the job spec. So they'll say you will be responsible for this, this, this. So what I would do is I'd take each one of those and apply your skills, what you've done, your background to each of those. Because you have to put yourself into the shoes of an HR consultant who's looking at 5,000 resumes for the same position, for one position. And they want to make it easy. They want to see who's the right person for this job. And as Tim said, those key words, okay, so it says, you will have to coordinate such and such. If they see that in your resume, okay, I've done experience, I've coordinated, God knows what you've done, but something around that's related, they'll say, this person has everything that's right for this job. So that's the thing that I would strongly kind of stress for you when you're doing your resume and your cover letter. I do kind of a summary of qualifications. So I put each job spec, and then I put the experience I have on that. So I'm sharing a secret here. I don't know whether I should share it or not, but I'm sharing that with you. And I just say that, interviews in the government, I found they are tough, because it's based all on fairness. I'm sure both Adam and Tim can relate to that, and Sonali can also, in terms of that. So you have to be really prepared. It's like studying for an exam. I'll tell you, like my last position, I took 2 weeks off work just to prepare for my position. Yeah, and it was day and night in terms of, just preparing myself, knowing my stories. So that's something that I would strongly recommend to all of you, is that in terms of the experiences you guys have now and the experiences you build, write them down.
Yes.
Because that's going to be key when you come, for a job. People will ask, why are you right for this position? And you're going to have to tell them, why am I right for this position? Well, I did this, I did this, I did that. And so it helps if you have that all written down. So I'd strongly kind of recommend that to all of you.
And your resume really should change for each job that you're applying for. That's really important too. You don't want to keep sending in the same one because you want to tailor it to that particular job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the other question was about government. But Sheldon, do you have some insights, some tips about how to get in CAMH or just social services in general?
For me, it's starting your career early in health, volunteering, trying to seek employment in the healthcare field, even if it's low paying while you're in school, making those connections with managers, with employees. LinkedIn also is a huge tool. When I left Northwick General, I joined a LinkedIn account, and a lot of my colleagues there became managers in other organizations, and I was able to connect with them that way. Healthcare is such a huge culture of nepotism, unfortunately. So I think the common denominator here is you got to kind of make your name and face out there, get it out there.
So we probably won't have time for all of your questions, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. And then if you don't, feel free to sit closer to the front, and then when we start our networking, you'll have more of an opportunity to ask your questions. Okay?
Good afternoon, everyone. Omar just spoke about having your postgraduate degree being very important, but what about in terms of having a college postgraduate certificate that's very specialized? Something such as the Ministry of Transportation, where not many times you can do a bachelor degree in something like transportation, where college programs who offer degrees in transportation or postgraduate college certificates. So how would you think, for all of you, in terms of having a postgraduate college certificate paired with your bachelor degree, would that be sufficient enough to get a good role or starting position in government without having, say, master's degree?
I would say, yeah, that'd be very important. Another thing is, like, I've always found that with your college, going to college after university is very helpful, because you get that practical element to the theoretical piece of it. So it depends on where you're going into. Like, specifically, I wanted to become a policy advisor, so postgraduate was very important for me in terms of getting into what I wanted to get into. But I would say, the thing is, the provincial government is so big, and that's a real advantage of working for it, because you can specialize in so many different fields, and you have so many opportunities. And so, there are different skill sets that are needed, and it's not specifically, and I think you're very correct in saying that's not just postgraduate in terms of a master's or anything like that. I mean, college is very, very important too after university if you're looking for a specific skill set. So I would say it'd be very important with Ministry of Transportation, within Ministry of Natural Resources, within the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines. There are specific skills that are needed that college would provide. Yeah.
How many people here are doing their undergrad? It's like news for you, you're not done. Whether you go to a postgraduate and graduate school or college, or even some diplomas or other certificates, it's following up on what Omar said. You really have to know, if you have an idea of what you want to get into, you have to know what the skills are and if that are needed. And if part of those skills are required for some sort of post-undergrad, whether college or postgraduate, you can't deny that. You're going to have to look into that. But even once you get to there, you're always going to have to constantly be looking at continuing education. It doesn't mean going back at another undergrad or graduate degree, or going to college and getting a diploma or certificate, but looking at 2-3 days courses, additional training you can do. But again, just to hit on what Omar says, you really do have to know what you're going to be taking after undergraduate, whether it's going to be for the university or college, if it's what you need to get into the job. I work in a job where there's a lot of lawyers in there, people that have law degrees, but you don't need it to get into the job. I don't have a law degree. But a lot of those people have gone, spent quite a lot of money, quite a lot of time, and they're not doing law, they're coming and doing a job that I've gotten with an undergraduate and a graduate degree, and a lot of community experience. So if you want to be a lawyer, you're going to need to get a law degree. If you want to get into government, maybe you don't need a law degree. So you really have to do your research, have a rough idea of what it is that you'd like to get into if you want to get into government social services, and understand, do I need a postgraduate? Do I need a law degree? Do I need an MSW? Can I get a college diploma? And really allow that to be the driver in terms of determining where and if you're going to go do school after undergrad.
As somebody that doesn't have any postgraduate studies, I just have a bachelor's. For me, I haven't really faced any barrier because of that. I mean, I have no problem returning to school, but at this point I just haven't. I probably will, but I mean, I just take courses through U of T. They offer, sometimes 2-3 day courses through the School of Public Policy and Governance. But what I will say is my advantage was just the breadth of experience that I brought. And with policy too, and Omar can speak to this, that policy is very important to have multidisciplinary teams of people, right? Because you need different ways of thinking and different ideas and whatnot. So I really thrived in that environment, and it really worked well for me. I mean, in my undergrad, I did do quite a bit of research and whatnot, so my communication skills were still strong, but I would say, it really depends. I know a lot of people that they've worked in government for many years and they've never done anything other than a bachelor's, so I'm not necessarily the person that's going to be hung up on that. Yeah, I think it can definitely be a combination of experience and education too. But don't stop going to school, I'm not saying that, but just speaking as somebody that doesn't have one.
So I agree with everything that's been said, and the only thing that I would encourage is whatever choice you make for your postgrad, really research that. I think we've said that about a lot of things, and maybe from two angles. So one could be, what's the job that you want, and work backwards, what do they need? And the other is actually going to all of the different programs that you're considering and looking at where people ended up and trying to talk to alumni from those programs and really understanding. Sometimes they've ended up somewhere, but they might say, well, I didn't really need this. So making a really conscious choice of why you're going to invest that additional time.
Very much. And if any of you have questions about what can I do with my degree, what career options are available to me, and what should I be considering, the Career Center is here to provide support in helping you to research your options and helping you to figure out what will be, what career options would speak to your interests and your strengths and your skills and all of those things. So we're here. I think we've probably got time for one or two more questions.
Cool. Thanks for coming in and answering those questions for us. Obviously, from all your stories, volunteering has been very important. And as a person who's going to school, working full time, I'm just wondering, if you guys were working while you were going to school, how much volunteer time is necessary? I often feel that I don't have time to volunteer. I've got a couple of a day off most weeks, and I'm just wondering how much time you guys found in general was asked of you for these volunteer opportunities.
Time management is key. I worked 30 hours a week during my undergrad, and I volunteered quite a bit as well and was heavily involved in school life. It was all about time management, just finding and making that time. Monday to Friday, I went to class in the evening, I did all of my work, just made sure everything was sort of up to speed, and then any opportunity that I had a window of time, I filled it with some volunteer work or student government or something, and I managed it. And being organized is really key. But I think it's important to find time for that. I really made an effort to do that, and I think it's paid off. So it's
I might say just also think about all of your idle time. So think about, is it summer? Is it during when you have time off in between school? It doesn't have to be consistently every week. So it could be in the, there are times in the school semester where it's really busy, and then there's times where it's not as much. So you might maximize the times where it's lighter and then come back to it, take a break from it. So it kind of goes with the time management, but it's thinking out whenever you're bored, that means you had time.
I would just say to prioritize. If you know that this volunteer opportunity is going to get you into what you want to get into, then it's something that you'll make time for, and you'll have to sacrifice something else. So I think priorities would be key.
No, it's okay. That's all I can say.
Okay, congrats. A little bit more time.
I was just wondering from your experience, to what extent organizations are willing to train, like basically you have some sort of related skills, but not necessarily direct skills. Are they willing to sort of take you on and train you up to speed, or are they looking for like direct, really related skills?
I'll jump in quickly. Again, I think it depends on the job. I was reading something the other day that, especially in social services, and again, depending on the job, my impression is that it's really based a lot on the soft skills. Tim mentioned a lot of communication. So much of what I do is be able to effectively communicate. I'm not going to talk about now, but be able to communicate effectively, verbally, and in writing. If you want to get the government, you absolutely have to be able to do that. No question about it. At least that's been my experience. I think a lot of it is, again, government social services is they'll bring you on if they feel like, we have a real solid person here who we're going to be able to teach the specifics of the job. You have a good background in, say, your education, combined paid, unpaid work, volunteer experience. So really my impression is that you may not need specifics, very specific training or education in order to get a job, but you are going to need to demonstrate that you are going to be able to learn, and you're going to be able to be able to do what you're taught very effectively with a minimal amount of oversight and direction.
The only thing I'll say about it is try to think about, assess if you can what skills you have now, right? So you have a certain skill set out of the training, going to school, you can write reports, or you can do research, or you can probably use social media maybe better than a lot of people, in the working world, some people. So there's something you have to offer. And I say this back to the unpaid volunteer type work. You probably have something to offer there, but there's something that whoever is going to take you on, and that goes back to the 3 interviews to get a volunteer position, if they take you on, they have to give time. It's just a natural part of the process. That's why they want to screen you, even if it's for volunteer work. And then you want to think about what you can get out of it. It might not be training, I'm spending the day training you, but you're learning about how they do their job by being there or collaborating with them on something. So you have to kind of seek out the training you want through the exposure, but also saying what you're going to give them something through your volunteer time.
I would recommend too looking at competencies. I know the Ontario Public Service is big on that. So things like problem solving, situational judgment. If you Google this, you'll come up with a list of these competencies, and I think they're really useful to help you prepare yourself for some of these roles. A lot of the relationship building and networking. A lot of these skills are things that you can develop in so many different ways, right? So by looking at that, you can also assess yourself and try to gain the experience yourself too. But it really is a good way to figure out if you're going to be able to fit into that role. I would say myself personally, I haven't seen or experienced where there is a lot of room or opportunity to really take time to train people. It really just depends on where you work. I've always worked in a high volume. Deadlines are so short that really it's frustrating if I find they get frustrated if you don't have those skills that they want necessarily. But look at competencies, and really assess yourself.
Sheldon, did you have any comments?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got time for one last question.
Have you guys explored the public service exam? I want to work in the public service after I graduate from York. I'm already working in the Service Canada part-time, but they have this bridging program that provides you with a part-time job for graduates as after they graduate. But the problems with funding and Stephen Harper. There's a lot of trouble, so they're cutting down the program and they're not accepting a lot of students. So as the public service exam, something I should look at.
So do you recommend public?
Well, for federal government jobs, you have to. It's a requirement for most federal government jobs, and I think there's 3. There's like communications and I can't remember now. But for federal government, as far as I know, I haven't applied for one in a while, but they usually require some kind of qualification exam. They're not easy. You sit in an auditorium with like a few hundred people, but you can do a lot of practice beforehand. If you look online, there's a lot of guides and things that can help you with those tests. I mean, I was always terrible at this shape turns into this shape equals this, so I did a lot of testing beforehand to make sure that I was prepared. But it's their way of screening people, and it's unfortunate, but it's a screening tool, I would say. So.
And the Career Center's Resource Library also has some material that provides you with different tests, so you might want to take a look at combining their resource. Okay? All right, so this brings us to the end of our formal Q&A session. So the intention for this afternoon session was really to provide you with an opportunity to hear about different career options and career paths and learn from our very accomplished alumni and gain some insight on what it's like and how you can possibly get your career started in government and social services. So we hope you found it informative and inspiring. I certainly did. So please join me in thanking our panelists.